Now let's go in reverse. Now we've got the picture of a circle. How do we find its equation? Same idea. So we kind of need to work in reverse. We still need to find its center and its radius. So for the first picture, you need to figure out where's the middle of the circle, which looks like it's about here, and work backwards. What's its point? Well, the point for the center, remember you do x's first, is -6. And then it goes up 5, so +5. So your center is at -6, 5. Then your next question should be, well, what's your radius? What did you go in every direction from the center? Well, I went 1, 2 up, 1, 2 left, 1, 2 right, and 1, 2 down. So my radius is 2. I went 2 in every direction. Now you can just do your equation like we did at the beginning of this section. We need an x and a squared plus a y and a squared. And remember, the center, we plug in the opposite. So if I see a -6 as my x, I'm going to do a +6 when I plug it in. A 5 as my y means I plug in a -5 or -5 as my y. And remember, the other side is your radius squared. So my radius is 2, so I actually have to do 2 squared. And do the math. It gives you 4. So there's my equation for my circle based on the picture. It's this x + 6 squared plus y - 5 squared equals 4. And we're done. Let's take a look at one last one. Let's figure out, again, we need 2 pieces of information. We need a center, and we need a radius. Let's start out with the center. So let's think about where's the middle of the circle. Looks like it's about here. So let's find its x and its y coordinate. Its x coordinate always comes first, is -5. Its y coordinate looks like it's -6. Just like all of the other problems, I still need a radius, which means how many am I going out in every direction from the center? So I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4 up, 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4 down, and 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left. So that means our radius is 4. So now I can come up with our equation for our circle, because all I need is a center and a radius. I have something squared with x's plus something squared with y's. And let's see. So I've got something squared with x's plus something squared with y's equals, well, let's see, what's going to go with the x's is we've got a -5 as our center for the x's, so we'll actually do the reverse, which will be a +5. We've got a -6 for the y's on the center, so we'll do the reverse, it'll be a +6. And on the other side, remember, it should be that the radius is squared. So that means 4 squared, which will give me 16. Do the math. Don't leave it as a 4 squared. And that's our final answer. We've got x + 5 squared plus y + 6 squared equals 16. And we're done. Continuing along, let's take a look at the next example on the next page. So on the next one, we have an x + 1 squared plus y squared plus 2 equals 0. So what we notice with this one is we have a +2 that is not grouped with either the x's or the y's, which means it's a part of our radius. So we need to move it to the other side. So to actually make it a part of the radius and to appear that way, we'll subtract 2 from both sides, which now gives us an x + 1 squared plus a y squared equals now -2. So that means if we're looking at this like a circle, we'd look for the center first by looking for what's with the x's, which is a +1, which means the center itself would actually have a opposite of that, a -1. And then notice that there is nothing inside with our y, so the y coordinate for our center would be a 0. However, remember that our radius is squared in our formula. So to actually find the radius, we would have to take the opposite, the square root, and that would give us the square root of -2, which, remember, if you have a negative underneath a square root, remember that it comes out as an I. So that would give us I square roots of 2. There is a huge problem with this. When we graph things on the real number line. This I means we've got something that's not real, we've got something that is imaginary. So what this actually means is that there is no graph. The graph is non-existent. Why? Because we get an imaginary radius, which means there would be no graph on the real number line. So we'll say a fancy answer here. We'll say that the graph is non-existent. Okay. So the graph is non-existent. Now let's take a look at the next one. Now the next one is not the same problem. We can still start out by looking at the center with what's along with the x's and what's along with the y's and taking the opposite because they're inside of parentheses. So for the center, because I see a +1, we'd actually use a -1 as our x coordinate for the center. And because I see a -2, we'd actually use a positive or +2 for our center. So far, so good. Now on the other side, it's that our radius is squared. Well, that means actually get the radius, if it's already squared, is we'd have to take the square root. Well, the square root of 0 is just 0. So this is not the same answer, though. This is saying we have a point, -1, 2, and that would be the center normally of what our circle is. But by saying that the radius is 0, it means we're not going up, down, left, or right. We're just going to stay where we are. So for this one, our graph really is just a point at -1, 2. So what this means is whenever we have a radius of 0, we're just going to have a point. Where's our point? Where the center would have been. So this is just going to be a point at -1, 2. So we have kind of 3 options. You actually get an actual number for your radius, which means you've got a circle. You get 0 for your radius, which means you have a point, or you get the square root of a negative, which means you have an imaginary number, which means there is no graph at all. Let's continue along looking at